All right now on the phone for our 100th episode, I'm very excited. We have audio karate guitarist Jason Camacho on the phone. The band recently reunited. They've already played some shows with the Descendants, just announced that they're going to be playing their debut album, Space Camp, coming up here in August. Space Camp just got its first vinyl release. It's up for pre-order now. It's coming out in July. They got more shows later on in the year, and also celebrated the 16th anniversary of Space Camp earlier this week. So we got a whole lot to talk about. Jason, man, how are you?
I'm doing very well, Anthony. Thank you for having me on.
Awesome. So, just getting right into it, how did the audio karate reunion get going this time?
I'd spoken casually to the guys a handful of times in probably the last decade, and Rob at Wiretap Records approached Art and said, hey, he's been a big fan since 2002, and when Space Camp came out, what would the possibility be of getting Kung Fu Records to allow him to do a vinyl reissue of it? And Kung Fu was super cool and said, yeah, Wiretap, go ahead and do it. And the guys came to me because I still own, a quarter of it, and they're like, hey, would you be down to do this? I'm like, sure. And they said, well, part of it stipulates that we'll do some shows to support it. What would you say about that? I'm like, well, I haven't played guitar in, 10 years, but yeah, I don't think I've forgotten the songs. I'd love to do it. And then from there, it's just taken off, and we told Bill from Descendants, hey, we're reuniting to release our record. Descendants are touring. Can we come out? And Bill's a huge fan. He was like, hell yeah, you guys could come out, pick some shows. So it's kind of snowballed from there, and there's been some interest, so we'll be doing some other stuff later in the year. It's really, really cool, though, to be able to do it now and be so much more appreciative of it. When you're young and you're living in the moment, you think you're going to tour forever, and that's not the case.
Yeah, I did not realize that you stopped playing guitar, you said, for 10 years?
Yeah, I didn't. The guys were doing Indian school, and I'm a fan of that, and I was into it, but I just stopped playing guitar.
Wow, so 10 years, I knew the other guys were doing Indian school in between. How long had it been since you played with them? Did you just stop after audio karate, or had it been even longer than 10 years since you played with the other guys?
So our last show as audio karate would have been Art and I did the score for an indie film called Maquillaje, which is Spanish for makeup, and it's about a girl, but I digress there. So we did the score to that. We scored the entire movie, and we did a show to kind of honor that's release, and that would have been sometime in the fall of 2006.
Oh, wow.
And that probably would have been the last audio karate show with the four of us.
Jeez, okay, so yeah, it really has been quite a while then. When did the rehearsals start? When was the first time you guys started playing together again?
We started playing together again in earnest about 3 months ago. We were pleasantly surprised at how much of it we still remembered.
Wow. So, even before playing with them, did you have time to pick up the guitar? When you got in there with them, that was the first time you played?
That was pretty much it, yeah.
Wow. That is blowing my mind. I guess I did not. I knew you didn't play in Indian school with them, but I did not realize you've not played in 10 years. That isn't. I think that is so impressive that you picked it back up and you learned it. That is really, really cool. So, what a great way to come back. Like you said, you played some shows with the Descendants. I know you guys played a impromptu show before that. How'd that go?
No, so that was a place called Old Town Pub in Pasadena, which I don't know how familiar you are with L.A., but Pasadena is a city of about 400,000 people, like 15 minutes east of downtown L.A., and it was unannounced and impromptu, and we announced it on social maybe like an hour before we were going to go on, and surprisingly, like 50 people were there.
Wow, that is pretty good. So that kind of brings us to that, and like I mentioned, Space Camp turned 16 last Tuesday. Now, it's getting its first vinyl release, and going back, what was it like recording that record? I assume, was that like your first experience in a real studio with a real producer and like a budget and everything?
It was. So looking back on it now, Kung Fu Records and Joe Escalante, they gave us $20,000, and they said, hey, Trevor Keith, he produced it from Face to Face. Take these kids. I was like 19 at the time, maybe 20, and go to the studio. We recorded at West Beach, which is in Hollywood. It was owned by Brett Gurewitz, and Offspring did Smash there. I think they did part of like an Out Come the Wolves by Rancid there. Just awesome studio. So like, hey, go make a record. And we prepared, but I think we had the song super prepared, but at that age, you're not really prepared for sort of the gravity of what it is, and your expectations are one thing, and then the reality of like, hey, you want to you guys want to make a Recipe for Hate or something, but you guys aren't Bad Religion and you're not that good. So Trevor was awesome. He was patient. I don't know that me now I could have the patience to work with a bunch of teenagers, but no, he was awesome, and we're super happy with that record. I think it still holds up as a pretty solid pop punk record.
I would have to agree with that. And I mean, how long were you guys a band before that? I know that right there was a band before Audio Karate. And I mean, like how far into changing the name and becoming Audio Karate was Space Camp? I mean, were you guys still a pretty new band by the time Joe got a hold of you guys and you signed to Kung Fu and everything?
No. So Gabriel on drums, he's my cousin, and they're all a year older than me. I'm a year younger than Art and Husto and Gabe. But they'd been jamming together in some fashion or another since they were about 14, 15 years old. So prior to Space Camp, we'd been a band, I would say, maybe about a good 5 years. And a bulk of those songs, like Senior Year and Betrayed, and some of those were done, probably we were playing those for about 2-3 years before we got to make that record. So we were ready for the most part. Nintendo 89 was probably one of the latter songs that we wrote leading into it, and I think it carries some of the maturity, and you can kind of see like, okay, this was maybe written by some guys who've been playing together for a while.
And actually, it's funny you bring up Nintendo 89, because we're going to be playing some songs off Space Camp, and that was going to be the first one that we played tonight. That's probably one of the band's like most popular, well-known songs, and that was your first music video, I believe, too. Kind of going like what I was saying, like being in like a real studio for the first time, real producers and stuff. I mean, what was it like doing your very first music video? Because I kind of hear from like bands, sometimes it's a really, really good experience, but then other times I hear very nightmarish things about music videos. Like they're not as fun to make as they may seem.
Oh, it's super cool because it was super low budget and very kind of indie. Joe Escalante was making movies at the time, so he had camera stuff and film equipment, and he fancied himself a director. So he said, "Hey, let's do a video for Nintendo 89." And that place there was our lockout, and it's in Rosemead. It's a place called Stormore. It's still there, although I don't know if they still allow bands to rehearse. And we just went on the message board on our website at the time and said, "Hey, on this date we want to do a video. Come on out." And about 100 people showed up. And then we said, okay, well, where can we get an ice cream truck? Young people like ice cream. Let's find an ice cream truck. So we went and rented one of those for like $50 a day. The ice cream man is Husto's brother, who's a school teacher. Vanessa, the girl that's featured throughout, she was just one of the girls that showed up. Has been a longtime fan and now a longtime friend. But both Art and Joe were like, hey, who is that? Like, that girl's kind of something. We should ask her and see if she'd want to kind of be the female lead. What's cool about that video is you watch the beginning, and that's Husto's mom talking in Spanish saying the ice cream truck's there, but those little girls playing are Husto's nieces, and they're like grown women now, so it's kind of funny to like make fun of them and say, oh, hey, look at you, you're a kid. And it was cool. It was certainly not nightmarish in any capacity.
Good. That is awesome. So yeah, right now we're talking to Jason Camacho, guitarist of the recently reunited Audio Karate. We're going to be playing some songs tonight from them. So first off, right now, here's Audio Karate with Nintendo 89 right here on the Power Chord Hour. On the Power Chord Hour, that was Audio Karate with Jason, and before that was Audio Karate with Nintendo 89. On the phone, I have guitarist Jason Camacho. We're talking about Audio Karate's reunion, playing shows with the Descendants, the 16th anniversary of their debut album, Space Camp, and a whole lot more. Jason, you still doing good?
Still doing good.
Perfect. So you did a little promo video when you guys reunited or Kung Fu Records did on their YouTube page, and I was really happy to hear you guys talk about comps for a minute, because when I interview bands from that era, I like to talk about them, because I feel like Audio Karate was like one of that last era of bands that could really like get exposure off of comps, and like it seems like they did a lot for bands at that time. I mean, does it seem like that? Does it seem like when you guys started having music put on like the Kung Fu comps and all that you did see a difference? More people showed up and everything, like to shows?
Well, what was the most telling, I'd say, Anthony, was you put a song on a comp, like the 1089 was on Warped Tour, it was on Cinemera, Beer Buddy, it was on several, but you could see when you were opening for like a TSOL or some band where really Audio Karate probably had no business opening for, but one way or another it worked out, and the crowd would hate you, let's say. But then you play the comp song, and you'd see like 50 people kind of like turn from the bar and go and like start tapping their head and like, oh, okay, these are those guys. I like these guys. Before, 10 minutes prior, they hated you. So yeah, you really got to see the traction that way. I mean, in an era pre, YouTube or Spotify or anything to get your music, if you didn't have college radio play, if you had a song on a $2 or $3 Hopeless or Fat or Epitaph comp, that was huge. The legs and the mileage you would get out of that song and really that whole record was huge. It's actually a really cool time.
That just, I don't know, that part really interests me because that like really like specifically late 90s, early 2000s, it just seems like comps really did do something for bands. And it's funny because me personally, I'm 25. I didn't hear of Audio Karate until maybe 5 or 6 years ago, but funny enough, it was on a comp. So it's like, even like years later after the fact, I'm still such a strong advocate of that, of like, you can find so many great bands on comps, and it's just like a lost, I don't know if art form's a word, but it's like, it's a lost thing. And I don't know, I love talking to bands from that era about that. And, the pre-internet, or maybe not pre-internet, but social media and really getting exposure other ways. So I think that's really cool. Like what song was on the comps the most? Nintendo 89, is that the one that seemed to make it on most of the comps?
That was the one that made it on the most, and then Kung Fu and Hopeless each had comps that had some of the B-sides. We had 3 additional songs that didn't make it on the Space Camp that were pretty cool, and those did that. But yeah, to put a number on it, like Nintendo 89, if you look at our Spotify numbers, the amount of plays it has over anything else is like exponential because people just love that song. They've heard it one way or the other. I don't even know if they've heard the entire record.
And speaking of which, you guys are going to be playing that front to back in a few months here in August. You announced that just today. I'm talking to you on it's May 17th right now, and August 17th, I believe it is, you guys are playing San Diego?
Yes.
All right, so you're playing Space Camp front to back. I know. Before we started this, you mentioned there's some songs on there you have not played in a long time or yet live. I know you mentioned the very last song on the album. Are there any others on there that never got played live?
San Jose, we played intermittently live, but that was kind of the last of that Fat Records sort of super fast no effects beat. That's the best way I could describe it that we wrote. And as we started getting slower and fatter, that one became harder to play. One day we played a handful of times, so those will be challenging. Like, we're actually going to have to relearn and study and really get those going well, because the last thing we want is like, hey, come see us do this record start to finish, and it suck.
And actually, if I'm not mistaken, I was looking on your Instagram page, today too actually marks, I believe, the 16th anniversary of the Space Camp release show, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. That one is at the Chain Reaction. Do you remember much about that show?
I remember blotches of it because we were having a good time and we were partying a little. But I remember I dyed my hair red before the show, and I wore a white T-shirt like a bonehead. And then by the end of the show, the shirt was pink because all the manic panic had run out of my hair. That was, early 2000s. That's when punk guys still bleached and then dyed their hair. I don't know if they're doing that much these days.
Nice. So earlier we were talking with Space Camp. Trevor Keith of Face to Face produced that one, and then Bill Stevenson produced Lady Melody. What was it like? I mean, recording with Bill Stevenson. I mean, I and just playing shows too. I mean, that has to be a rad way to get your band back together. And the first thing you do is play shows of the Descendants. I mean, that is so rad.
Oh, it was sick. with regards to making the record, I mean, Blasting Room's in Fort Collins. It was snowing at the time. We did it in December. You actually live at the studio when you record there. So you roll out of bed with, morning breath, and it's like, oh, hey, you want to comp some guitar? It's like, sure. But working with Bill, I'll call him a genius because I really think the guy is. His level of talent and his ear is sick. But in talking to the guy, he's kind of a trippy guy. So you'll ask him, like, hey, how did that go? And you'll see him kind of looking at you with just blank face for what feels like an eternity. And you're like, was this guy just tune me out? Or is it, yeah, you were pulling your strings a little sharp. And it's like, no, he was listening to me. It's just, he just his brain works different. But it was super cool. He made us comfortable, and he really had us look at those songs, Jesus Alive and Well and Living in Mexico and Hey Maria and a couple of them that we thought we had down. And he wasn't pushing in any way, but he was like, hey, have you considered this? Have you considered moving this? Why are you guys doing this? Oh, because we think it rocks. Okay, but why do you need to make this song 5 minutes? Good point. Super cool. And then during pre-production, kind of a geek fan moment, he wanted to play Jesus Alive and Well with us on drums. And we said, yeah, that'll happen, but you got to play Hope, because we had covered Hope by Descendants for a while, so we got to play 2 songs with Bill, and he almost broke Gabriel's kit because the guy hits like a frickin' power lifter. I mean, the guy's just an animal.
That is absolutely so rad. Something I've always wondered about the Blasting Room real quick too. I mean, is that in a residential area there? Like, where is that in Fort Collins? Because I mean, I feel like it's been immortalized by most. I know, like me, people talk about the Blasting Room, like, man, my favorite records are made there. Like, is that like in its own kind of spot, or is that like it's like in the middle of Fort Collins?
It's on kind of the outskirts. I mean, Fort Collins is what I'd consider a small town. I mean, I'm from LA, so anything half a million people is a small town, right?
Yeah.
But it's nondescript. You'd never know it if you drove by it, and it's just kind of on the outskirts and sort of the industrial area. But once you get inside, it's awesome, man. That's a world class studio, and Bill and Jason Livermore, they know their gear. I mean, when you get there, like from the time you plug in, it's like game on, and you're gonna leave with just a sick record.
That's rad. So, I mean, having over a decade to sit with both Space Camp and Lady Melody, I mean, which one do you prefer? Do you have a favorite of the two?
I prefer Lady Melody. Not that I don't like Space Camp in any way. Just it's I can hear kind of our youth there, whereas Lady Melody, I think. I feel like you listen to Space Camp and it's like, okay, cool, that sounds like Blue Skies era, sort of Atari's, Movie Life, kind of what everyone was sort of doing at the time. Whereas I feel like Lady Melody, you put it on today and it still doesn't really sound like anyone else. It's kind of a punk record, it's kind of an emo record, but it's not really kind of hard either. I feel like that record still kind of holds up, and the replay value is still kind of gnarly. I mean, you listen and there's some guitar stuff that's like, what's going on there? The drums. I just feel like Bill really allowed us to, hey, just play your asses off, start to finish, and that'll be fine. Don't worry about what happens with it. Who cares if it ever goes to radio? Like, just make the best record you guys can and have fun. I like that.
That's awesome. I get what you're saying. Like, I love, I mean, as a fan, I love both records, but I do get what you mean with Lady Melody. I feel like you guys really like it's almost interesting to think about what the third album would have sounded like, because you definitely do hear that progression there. And I mean, like you mentioned before too, yeah, like with Space Camp, some of those songs you had, are a little more like, it's like you guys like younger and stuff, and it's like you kind of come into your own on Lady Melody. So I get that. I can't say one or the other. I always kind of bounce back, but I don't know. That's interesting to hear from someone, on both of them, which one they prefer. So, I mean, like right now, what is in Audio Karate's future? Like you guys are playing the shows. Space Camp Vinyl is coming out in July. Have you guys tried recording any new music? Is that a possibility? Do you see much going else or Do you see more kind of going along in the future for Audio Karate?
So we've, in between the rehearsals, getting ready for the Descendants shows, we started writing some new songs, and we haven't really started in earnest working on a new record. But you mentioned what would a third Audio Karate record have sounded like. At the time, in '06, when we kind of stopped playing, I had built a recording studio, and we have a full album from that era.
Oh, wow. I did not know. Is that common knowledge, or is that...
No, that's not common knowledge. And in fact, when I found my old computer that had all the Pro Tools files in it, I didn't remember that we had done half of those. I remembered we had like 2 or 3 songs, and we had talked about like, hey, that'd be cool if we remixed them and did an EP or something. But no, we have enough for a full-length album.
Wow.
And I was actually surprised that some of the songs are actually really good.
Wow, that I don't know. I cannot believe that. That is really, really rad, man. So I mean, so is there thoughts of releasing that eventually? Is that the plan?
Right now, the plan is to do these shows and to try to take sort of the Space Camp shows to as many places as we can. Unfortunately, well, fortunately for us, but kind of unfortunately, I guess, if you're a fan, Huso's got a family, I got a family, we've all got kind of jobs outside of music, so doing a conventional, like, hey, we're going to get in a van and bounce for 3 weeks sort of tour isn't really feasible for us. But between, going to the Northwest with Descendants, with doing Fest, we want to kind of do sort of 3-4 day stints. We would like to go to Texas and the South and then head up to New York and do some of the tri-state area up there. But next year's Lady Melody's 15th anniversary, I'd imagine we'll want to do something with that. And then, we'd love to work on a new record if we can write stuff that we're proud of and we know in our heart's heart doesn't suck. It feels cool, though, to be able to, we can kind of do what we want. We could finance our own projects if we wanted to have that kind of control. I mean, we work with Wiretap Records, but we don't really have a record deal. And nowadays, I don't know that you really need a label like you did when we were making records. So, I would say that unreleased record will probably get out there one day.
Oh, that is very rad. So yeah, where can people find Audio Karate online? They wanna connect with you guys. Where are you at online?
All right, so online we are at www.audiokarateisback on the Twitter, and yes, I'm older, so I call it the Twitter, like the Google. It's we're at the Audio Karate. On Instagram, we are just plain old at Audio Karate, and Facebook, I don't go on there because I don't want my information stolen and given to the government, but I think we are Audio Karate Band on Facebook.
And, Space Camp is getting the vinyl release, but it's also sold out, right? Are there any pre-orders left for that?
No, so there are none. We have 25 physical copies that we're going to have at the San Diego and LA shows, but we are working on a second run, and we were floored. I mean, when you do something like this blindly after doing nothing as a band for over a decade, and it sells out like in 72 hours in pre-sale, we couldn't believe that. We didn't think we'd sell 10 copies, to be honest with you.
Wow, that is insane, including for you, because once again, I mean, I did not realize you'd not played in 10 years. So yeah, I mean, that has to be pretty surprising for you. For like, I mean, what if we looked back, maybe even 5 months, you probably had no idea that you would be playing with the band again or doing any of this, and now you guys are playing shows, the vinyl selling out. That is really, really cool. So
yeah, it's huge. Thank you.
Yeah. So anything else you need, or anything else you want to add?
No, thank you so much, Anthony, for spinning us. And I've got to say, every night of the Descendants shows, I was using my Power Chord Hour picks. They're like the perfect gauge. They're not quite a Dunlop yellow. They're like somewhere between a yellow and a green, which is kind of where I like to roll. So I'm going to keep using them. Thank you.
So yeah, we're going to play some more audio karate now going out. Like you mentioned, next year, wow, yeah, Lady Melody turns 15, and it's going to be turning 14 just next month, just a few weeks from now. So I feel like we got to play something off that. So right now, here's Jesus is Alive and Well and Living in Mexico right here on the Power Chord Hour.